What happens when someone appears to answer a direct question, but subtly replaces it with a different question instead? In Natalie Shirilla's interview with Chris Cuomo, several of her responses sound persuasive and emotionally compelling on the surface. But when we slow them down and look closely at the language, a different pattern begins to emerge. At times, Natalie seems to answer something adjacent to what Cuomo actually asked. At other times, her explanation appears to undermine itself before she has even finished giving it. And that raises the central question of this video. Did Natalie's interview give the public a clearer understanding of Mackenzie? Or did it unintentionally reveal more about the way Natalie explains her? Hi, I'm Stina, and welcome back to Motive and Method. Before we begin, I want to let you know that everything in this video represents my opinion and interpretation based on publicly available information. I am not a psychologist or an attorney, and I am not diagnosing anyone or claiming to know anyone's private intentions. I hold a BA in communication with departmental and scholastic honors, and I have more than 25 years' experience in writing and verbal communication. That background shapes the way I examine language, framing, contradictions, behavior, and patterns, often from a perspective that differs from traditional true crime coverage. Today, I want to examine several moments from Natalie Shirilla's interview with Chris Cuomo on the Chris Cuomo Project, particularly what happens when Cuomo asks her a direct question and Natalie appears to answer something slightly different. I'll link the full interview in the show notes below for anyone who would like to watch it in its entirety. Before we get into the interview, please subscribe if you enjoy this kind of pattern-based analysis and give the video a like. If you would like to support the channel more directly, memberships are also open and include special perks for members. So, let's begin with the way Natalie frames the public's understanding of Mackenzie. Cuomo acknowledges how painful it is for Natalie when she catches herself speaking about Mackenzie in the past tense. He tells her that although her daughter is still alive, the life Mackenzie had before prison is gone. Natalie responds by drawing a distinction between the Mackenzie known by friends and family and the Mackenzie the public believes it knows.
Her friends, people that actually know who we are, know the truth. They know who she is. And the image that has been painted of her through storytelling, all this other things, it's not wholly accurate.
There are two phrases I want to examine here. First, Natalie does not simply say that people who know Mackenzie know the truth. She says people who know who we are know the truth. That subtly expands the defense from Mackenzie as an individual to the Shirilla family as a unit. The suggestion is that outsiders cannot fully understand Mackenzie because they do not know the family, and that the people inside the family possess the real truth. But that also places the family in the position of interpreter and gatekeeper. The people inside the family system are presented as the ones who understand what happened, while evidence producing an unflattering interpretation can be dismissed as storytelling, distortion, or lack of context. And then there is Natalie's careful phrase, "It is not wholly accurate." Notice, she does not say the public's image of Mackenzie is completely false. She says it is not wholly accurate. Now, that is a much more limited claim, and it quietly leaves room for parts of the public image to be accurate. So, Natalie begins this portion of the interview by asking the audience to trust the understanding held by Mackenzie's friends and family over the picture formed by the public record. Cuomo then turns to Mackenzie's relationship with Dominic, or Dom, Russo, and asks Natalie how she understood what other people saw as the relationship's radical ups and downs.
One of my favorite things to do with Mackenzie and Dom was talk to them about their relationship.
Right away, Natalie places herself inside Mackenzie and Dom's relationship. She is describing regular involvement in the relationship itself. Now, listen to how she expands on that involvement.
We spent a lot of time together doing everything. We went on vacation together. Where there was one, the other was there too. So, they were together for 4 years, and they were together the 4 years in a real pivotal time of their age where they were trying to figure life out and who they were.
Natalie presents that closeness as evidence that she understood their relationship and was a safe person for both of them. And it may genuinely show that Dom trusted her and felt affection for her. But from a family systems perspective, it also raises a question about boundaries. Natalie describes herself as someone who helped the couple navigate their relationship and someone both partners could approach when they were struggling. In other words, she was functioning as an advisor, mediator, and emotional stabilizer inside her daughter's romantic relationship. Now, that alone does not prove manipulative intent, but it may reflect triangulation in the family system sense, a third person in the family becoming part of the emotional structure between two people, particularly when there is conflict or instability between them. Now, listen to the text Natalie chose to demonstrate that closeness.
I'm going to show you a text message that I sent to Dom. We were very, very, very close. And one of my favorite things to do was help them navigate through their relationship. And they knew that they can both come to me for anything if they were struggling with stuff. Hi, I tried to call you. You don't have to call me back. I was just thinking about you guys. One of my favorite things to do is watch you guys grow and navigate through your problems together. They're not always fun and it's not always easy. But the point is that you guys grow a little more each time and learn a little bit more about yourselves and each other. I love you guys. Anyway, that was all. And then he said, nice to think you're always thinking about us and here for us and here for me. I love you.
Again, that text does show affection and trust. Dom tells Natalie that it is comforting to know that she is there for both of them, and specifically that she is there for him. But it also reinforces the same pattern. Natalie is not simply supporting the relationship from the outside. She appears to be part of the system through which a couple process problems and manage conflict. What Natalie presents as evidence of closeness may also show blurred boundaries. The question is not whether Natalie cared about Dom. I believe that she did. The question is whether she remained outside Mackenzie and Dom's relationship as a supportive parent, or whether she became one of the people helping regulate the relationship from within it. Cuomo later asked Natalie directly whether she viewed Mackenzie and Dom's relationship as toxic. I am not going to play her entire answer because it is long and repetitive, but I do want to summarize it fairly. Natalie says she did not see the relationship as toxic because Mackenzie and Dom spent so much time together. They stayed at each other's homes, cooked together, cared for one another, coordinated their lives, brought each other food, and appeared deeply in love. She also says the text messages may sound toxic, but that they lack context and do not reflect who Mackenzie and Dom really were. But none of those examples proves that the relationship was healthy. Spending every day together does not prove that a relationship is healthy. Protecting one another, bringing each other food, wearing matching outfits, and loving each other fiercely do not rule out toxicity. Love and toxicity are not mutually exclusive. Natalie answers a question about whether the relationship was toxic by giving evidence that Mackenzie and Dom were close and attached. But closeness and health are not the same thing. And I also question the claim that their text messages lack context. These were not one or two isolated messages presented without any surrounding conversation, There were extensive communications between Mackenzie and Dom, like hundreds, thousands of communications that provided substantial context for the conflict and volatility within their relationship. Now, Natalie does not identify the missing context that would materially change the meaning of those exchanges. Instead, she asks the audience to accept her personal impression of the couple over what their own communications appear to show. And Natalie may be completely truthful when she says she never personally witnessed toxicity, but "I never saw it" tells us only what Natalie witnessed. Couples often do not display their worst dynamics around family members, and someone behaving aggressively or controlling within a relationship may be particularly unlikely to show that behavior in front of the other person's mother. So, Natalie's personal experience with the couple cannot establish what did or did not happen privately. Later, Cuomo turns to the public image of Mackenzie after her incarceration. What he describes as the image of a wild, self-indulgent person driven by her appetites. He asks Natalie how she would help the public understand Mackenzie differently.
I can't speak on any of her activity in prison. She's not doing any of those crazy things people are saying. So what she's doing is she lays in her bed a lot. She colors. She doesn't like drama. So she tries to avoid that. And if there is, then she's always the first one to extend the olive branch to whoever it is to move on from there because she likes to bring people together.
Note, Natalie begins by saying, "I can't speak on any of her activity in prison." And then, in the very next breath, she speaks in considerable detail about Mackenzie's activity in prison. She tells us that Mackenzie lies in bed, she colors, avoids drama, extends olive branches, and tries to bring people together. A regular saint, I guess, a nun, saint, or whatever you want to call that. So which is it, though? Does Natalie not know enough to speak about Mackenzie's behavior in prison? Or does she know enough to provide this very specific and very flattering description of it? And she also does not really answer Cuomo's broader question about how the public should understand Mackenzie differently. She simply replaces one image with another. Instead of a self-indulgent wild child, Natalie offers us an image of someone quiet, artistic, peaceful, forgiving, and conciliatory. But she does not provide evidence for that description in this answer. Immediately afterward, Cuomo asks how Natalie explains what had been reported as an unusually high number of misconduct tickets for violating prison rules.
How do you explain what is reported as an unusual amount of misconduct tickets for violating prison rules?
Contraband isn't like drugs. It just means that you have something that's not on your vault list.
Natalie then explains that several items found during a single search could generate several separate misconduct tickets. She gives examples including a borrowed alarm clock, another inmate's pillow, an extra blanket, or food. She says Mackenzie once borrowed another inmate's alarm clock because she did not want to miss work. And because the clock was not on Mackenzie's property list, it was considered contraband. Natalie also addresses a medication violation. She says Mackenzie took another inmate's prenatal vitamin because Mackenzie may have felt unwell or may have been concerned that she was not receiving enough nutrients. And some of those examples may sound relatively minor, but notice what has happened to Cuomo's question. I call this Natalie's verbal sleight of hand. He asks why Mackenzie reportedly had an unusual number of misconduct tickets. Natalie answers by explaining the least alarming things those tickets could represent. Contraband could be an alarm clock. It could be a pillow or an extra blanket. But except for the alarm clock example, much of the answer becomes hypothetical. The question is, what did Mackenzie's actual misconduct tickets involve? Natalie also provides the most sympathetic possible motive for the medication violation. She suggests that Mackenzie took the prenatal vitamin because she was worried about her health or nutrition. But listen to the uncertainty in Natalie's explanation. Mackenzie may not have felt well. She must have been worried about getting enough nutrients. That is an interpretation of Mackenzie's motive. It is not necessarily an established fact. And whatever Mackenzie's reason may have been, she still took medication that belonged to someone else. Cuomo then moves away from hypothetical examples and asks about one specific reported violation.
Were some of the tickets as reported for sexually explicit video calls with an ex-inmate?
Well, that I can't speak on. All I can say to that is she's in her early 20s.
Once Cuomo identifies a specific reported violation, Natalie's certainty disappears. She says she cannot speak on it, and the only explanation she offers is that Mackenzie is in her early 20s. But Mackenzie's age does not answer Cuomo's question. Being in your early 20s may explain having sexual interests. It does not explain violating prison rules during sexually explicit video calls. When the misconduct is broad, Natalie can provide a long list of harmless possibilities. When Cuomo names a specific reported violation, however, she suddenly cannot speak about it. She substitutes Mackenzie's age for an explanation. Anyway, Natalie then offers one final explanation regarding the prison rules. These two sections come from the same answer, and I have shortened the material between them.
The only thing I can say is now that you know what the rules are, you got to follow the rules. And sometimes, unfortunately, we don't know what the rules are until we do. And then when you do, then follow them.
I have to wonder whether Natalie can hear herself. Every home, she tells them, every home, workplace, or institution has its own rules. And once you know those rules, you have to follow them. But Natalie's ability to explain the concept of rules was never the issue. The issue was why Mackenzie had reportedly accumulated an unusual number of misconduct tickets. Her statement that people sometimes do not know the rules until they break them may make sense as an explanation for one isolated mistake. It becomes far less persuasive when the subject is a repeated pattern of violations. And I want to ask you guys this. Based upon what we have heard from Mackenzie in the jail calls, what we have read and heard about in her communications with Dom, and the broader behavioral history already documented in this case, does Mackenzie really strike you as someone who consistently respected rules and boundaries? Or does she appear to be someone who often resisted rules when they interfered with what she wanted? Now, that does not mean every prison violation was serious. An alarm clock is not the same as violence. A pillow is not the same as a sexually explicit video call. But Natalie's speech about teaching her children to follow rules still does not explain the pattern Cuomo asked her to address. When the question is broad, Natalie fills the answer with favorable descriptions and innocent possibilities. When the allegation becomes specific, however, she often says she cannot speak to it. And when the conduct cannot be denied, she reframes it until it sounds less consequential than the issue Cuomo actually raised. Natalie began by saying that the public image of Mackenzie was not wholly accurate. But throughout these answers, she never really provides a coherent, evidence-based replacement for that image. And Natalie's interpretation may be sincere, but sincerity does not automatically make an interpretation accurate. In the end, I am not sure this interview reveals a different Mackenzie as much as it reveals the method Natalie uses to explain her. She narrows the question. She substitutes possibilities for specifics. She supplies sympathetic motives where the evidence may not establish one. And she repeatedly shifts the audience's attention away from the pattern of behavior and toward the least damaging interpretation of each individual incident. Not necessarily who Mackenzie really is, but how Natalie needs the public to see her. So, did Natalie help you guys understand Mackenzie differently? Or did her answers raise even more questions about how the Shirilla family understands and explains Mackenzie's behavior? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.